Rustic summer fun with a cherry on top is on the agenda for today. Welcome to Up All Night DIY. I'm Monica. Thanks for joining me. I'm hanging with my friend Shelly of Repurposed My Way and Dawn of Shabby Meets Bling, along with many other talented creators for the Rustic Wednesday, but on Saturday, challenge. Anything rusty, rustic, or primitive goes. Let's get into it. I saw this sign on Pinterest a few years ago, and since I have a thing for cherries, I wanted to recreate it in my own style. I cut some scrap wood to mimic the shape of the Pinterest original, but I tweaked it to suit me. I'll be doing a reverse stencil effect, so I'm going to base coat it with Ceramic Coat Watermelon, my favorite red. I pulled out my silhouette and cut my vinyl lettering to fit my sign. I used regular old shelf liner vinyl for this. It's far more economical. You feel me? I'll burnish my vinyl into place. I apply a layer of Mod Podge over the lettering. This will keep our top coat from bleeding under the vinyl. I cut a couple of cherries from vinyl too. I actually cut these by hand because originally I figured I'd hand paint them, but that seemed redundant upon reflection. This was far easier. So I'll add some Mod Podge to the edge of the cherries too. I'm going to apply a few dabs of crackle medium here and there to add a rustic vibe. I'm dabbing it on with a cosmetic sponge. I'll pounce on a thick application because I want the crackles on the larger side. Once the crackle medium is dry, I'll apply my top coat of Ceramic Coat Tropic Bay, my favorite color. I can already see the crackle forming. I've loaded my script liner brush with Ceramic Coat White, and I'll add an outline around the edge. I'll repeat this process, but with Ceramic Coat Spring Green this time. I'm going to go just above the white. Now for that spring green outline. Now for the exciting part. Let's remove the vinyl. Love this bit. So satisfying revealing the shape beneath. It's like a surprise each time. Wee! Cha-cha-cha-cherry. Let's float some shading on our cherries with Folk Art Floating Medium and Hippo Gray. I'll prep my brush with the floating medium, then side load with Hippo Gray, scooping the paint onto the corner of my brush, stroking it onto my plate to blend the medium with the paint. This will give me a gradient of color from dark to light. With the paint corner of my brush to the edge of the cherry, I'll lay down my shading. I usually put my shading to the left. In the original Pinterest picture, I think it's to the right, but this is just how I do it. So really, you just want to put it anywhere you think there would be a natural shadow. And I'm going to shade the cherry right here, where the front cherry casts a shadow on the back cherry. I'm going to shade around the edge of the sign with Hippo while I'm at it. You know, add some aging and grunge. You can actually do this by dry brushing it too. Either works equally well. I'll use my script brush to add stems with Hippo Gray right here on the cherries. Just real simple strokes. I'll add some white highlights to the cherries. I load my brush the same way as I did before. And of course, the highlights will go opposite the shading. I think the simple little touch of shading and highlights makes such a difference, don't you? I cut some star stencils because, you know, I gotta have my stars. I'll dab the stencils with white using a cosmetic sponge. Now, I didn't apply Mod Podge first, And you'll see that the paint does bleed a wee bit, but as this is a more rustic piece, I'm not going to sweat it. I had a few more stars down here too. I dry brush the edge of the sign with Ceram Coat Burnt Umber to distress the sign, and let's add some to the surface as well. I give it a light sanding to add to the more rustic style, and I'm going to spray it with clear matte sealer, and we're done. I grabbed this sweet loaf pan at a thrift store. We're going to give this a cherry facelift. I gave this a coat of Mod Podge to help the paint stick, and I'm going to give it 2 coats of Folk Art white chalk paint. I'm starting with the inside. I'm not going to paint it completely. I just want the paint to go down a wee bit because the bread will hide most of it. I want this to have an enamel look, so I'm going to use a cosmetic sponge to trim the edges with Ceram Coat Watermelon. I dot on my cherries using a dowel. I want these projects to coordinate with my summer cherry projects from last year, the year before. If you haven't seen those, I'll link the video in the description for you. They're really cute. I'm using spring green for some of the leaves and the stems, and Americana tree green for the other leaves. Yeah, and I'm adding a spring green leaf in the middle here. White dot highlights for the cherries, and then we're going to add some red checks. These don't have to be perfect. I mean, you know, it's hand painted, which I think is perfect for a more primitive look. And I'm just cleaning up those edges. See? Cute, right? I hit the edges with Tim Holtz Distressing Ink in Vintage Photograph. Then I'm going to come back with some black ink and add more grunge. And because this is supposed to look like enamelware, I'll seal it with clear gloss spray. To make the loaf of bread, we'll need some Model Magic. And I used a scrap of floral foam and some foam packing cylinders. They're kind of like, you know, pool noodles. I glued the cylinder pieces to the top of the floral foam, and I used some toothpicks to fasten the pieces together. Again, I wasn't super worried about whether it was perfect since this is a rustic piece. I like that more wonky look. The toothpicks really helped secure this in place, so I didn't have to wait for the glue to dry. I rolled out some Model Magic nice and flat to cover the foam structure, and I pressed it really firmly to secure it. As long as the majority of it was covered, this worked because again, it's going to go into the loaf pan, so you're not going to see the bottom of it. To add texture, I pounced it with an old toothbrush. While the clay was still wet, believe it or not, I gave it a loose coat of Ceram Coat Maple Sugar Tan. Then I'm going to dry brush it with Ceram Coat Golden Brown, then some burnt umber and light cinnamon to add depth and give it a baked look. I pounced on a layer of Deco Art multi-purpose sealer. Then I'm going to shake on some cinnamon, not only for aesthetics, but also for the lovely scent. You feel me? I wrap some red and white baker string around the loaf and pop it into the pan, and we're done. I found this adorable anthropomorphic coffee pot on Pinterest and added some cherries and text to it in Photoshop, then printed it onto cardstock. I cut it out and traced the shape onto more scrap wood. I give the wood a layer of white chalk paint. I'll give that a mo to dry, and while it does, I'll add some Tropic Bay Blue to the coffee pot. Then I'm going to do the same to the wood. I'll come back in to distress the edges of the image and the wood with vintage photograph and black ink. I'll apply a layer of Mod Podge to the wood and to the back of the cardstock. I'll line it up, and then I'm going to burnish it. I'll embellish her with some green vinyl leaves and a bow that I made from red and white baker string. And she's done. I'll pour some ceramic coat surfboard into these Dollar Tree salt and pepper shakers to give them a jaded appearance, but, you know, blow. I'll rotate the shaker until the paint has completely covered the inside surface. So now that they're finished, we'll work on the lids. I applied a coat of Mod Podge to the metal lids to assist with the paint sticking. First, I'm going to pounce over them selectively with Hippo Gray to dull the shine a wee bit. These salt and pepper shakers would have looked cute just as is, but since we're doing rustic, we're going to grunge them up. Now, again, I selectively tap on some burnt sienna, and I immediately shake on some cinnamon to give it that gritty, rusty effect. I sprayed them with clear matte sealer to keep the cinnamon from shedding. With my silhouette, I cut wee cherries from vinyl, which I'm going to apply to the shakers, and I also cut an S and a P, which I'll place over the cherries. Once the vinyl's in place, I did dab them with a wee bit of the vintage photograph ink, for consistency. I tied some of the red and white baker string around the shaker's neck, and that's that. They're both primitive and have a mid-century feel. So my final project was kind of a last-minute thing. I cut an arch from scrap wood and painted it with white chalk paint. I printed this really cute mid-century modern cherry image onto cardstock, just like I did the coffee pot. This time I'll Mod Podge the image onto the wood first. Then I'll add the Tropic Bay embellishment. And distress it with the inks. I didn't think of it beforehand, but I could have made this into a napkin holder, which I may still do, just by adding, a little wood piece in between another small arch. We'll see. And to finish it off, I add a sweet wee baker string bow to tie it all together with my other pieces. I love that winking cherry. Here's a final look. Please be sure to check out Shelly and Dawn's channels, as well as the jam-packed playlist. It is full of fabulous talent. I'll have links in the description box for you. There'll also be a list of my supplies. Be sure to show everyone some love with a thumbs up. It helps our channels grow. Please like, share, comment, and subscribe, and all that good stuff. Stay creative, my friends. Thanks for hanging with me. See you next time. Up all night with Monica.